Oh, Stranger Things, the bane of my existence. Yeah, you guys might not know this, but for a while, I was very indifferent to Stranger Things, to the point that I literally knew nothing about it. For most massive pop cultural series like this, spoilers tend to spread like germs at a Smash convention. But at no point did I ever have this series spoiled for me, nor did I have any interest in watching it. You see, back in 2016 when this series came out, I was just getting into high school, which meant I was trying to figure out a lot about myself, and I decided I didn't want to follow what everybody else was saying and do all the cool popular stuff because I wanted to be different. So when everybody was talking about this show and falling in love with it, I decided that's not my thing. And then by the time I grew up and got a brain, I was already very deep into my weeb arc, which meant I wasn't watching a lot of live television. At this point, which was about probably like 2 years ago, I didn't really have anything against the show. I just didn't really have any interest in watching it. Then season 4 came out, and everybody in my family watched it, and everybody told me to watch it, and I decided, alright, I'll finally get to it. Plus, my brother watched Arcane for me, and so I kind of owed him one, so I watched this to satisfy him. But what did I think of the show? It's pretty good. I'll get more into specifics later, but I totally get why this has such a massive mainstream appeal for a lot of people. It's got really good likable characters, very simple plot structure, and very good recurring antagonists. It kind of does everything you could ever want in a show, which also kind of leads into its biggest problem, which is that while it does a lot of things, it's not necessarily the best at doing anything. But I think that's enough of a preamble, so let's get into season 1. Season 1 of Stranger Things
I messed up. Okay, I messed up.
is actually not that bad. Even if my first time watching it, this was definitely my least favorite season. This season definitely sets the tone for what you're going to expect going forward for the rest of the show. It establishes the really good characters, it establishes the nice mystery horror themed elements that take a lot from Stephen King. But it also establishes a lot of the problems the show's going to have going forward in the later seasons. But I'll mention all the stuff I really liked first, because there is a lot to like about this first season. Number one, the characters are just really good throughout it. Hopper is probably the best character of this season, and he's at his best in this season. I think in the later seasons, he just gradually has a drop in his intrigue and his character overall. Joyce is also really good in this first season, and both her and Hopper kind of set the bar for what the characters in this season and a lot of the show do really well, which is that they take very archetypal characters like the drunk, lazy cop and the overprotective parent, and they tweak them just a little bit to show a bit more depth to them. Hopper probably being the best example of this, as he starts off and he's just really lazy and different to what's going on and doesn't really care that much, but once he starts to see a lot of the deeper conspiracy that's going on in Hawkins, he starts to get more intrigued and care more. A similar thing happens with Joyce, where in any other story she would be absolutely insane thinking that her son's talking to her through the lights, but because of the perspective we see throughout the story, it's better to understand her perspective and also see that she's kind of being the most rational person out there about all of this.
God help me, I will keep these lights up until the day I die!
Okay, well, maybe not the most rational person. All of the best characters in this show carry this to some sort of effect. They are very simple archetypal characters that you'd see in any other kind of story like this, but they get tweaked a little bit throughout the story. I mean, that's why everybody loves Steve so much, right? Oh, and don't worry, I'll get back to Mr. Harrington in a bit. The other two characters that really stand out to me in this first season is Nancy and Jonathan. They're both at their best here, and I think from here on out they kind of go downhill in the later seasons, but they're both really good here. I particularly like Nancy, as her motivation is very simple yet understandable. Like, she deadass thinks that this monster killed her friend, so she's like, okay, I'm gonna go kill it. I don't really like the trope of preppy cool girl gets with weird socially isolated guy and they kind of understand each other and they're like, huh, you're not as weird as I thought. But in the beginning it works fine enough as a framing device to get them to work together and to form a pretty nice friendship, which is kind of important for later, that this is a really good friendship. Both the adults looking for Will and the teens looking for the Demogorgon are probably the best part of season 1, but then that brings us to the part that I wanted to talk about the least, and that's the kids. I would say the kid adventure part of the show is probably the part of the show that interests me the least, which kind of sucks because this is a kids adventure show. Most of that just comes down to the fact that I don't think a lot of the kids are very interesting. I like Dustin, he's probably my favorite, and I just like how, specifically in season 1, a lot of his character is built on irony over the fact that he's probably the most nerdiest of all the kids, yet he's the one who comes up with all of the best plans all the time and always knows what to do, which, I don't know, I think is just interesting. Lucas is okay, I guess. I mean, his only real character is getting angry all the time and yelling at Eleven. And then there's Eleven, who is also okay. I know she's a lot of people's favorite character, and I think she's pretty good in season 1, and later on she gradually loses me a bit more, and it's mostly because, particularly after season 1, it feels like they keep trying to justify her being around, because there's realistically no reason why she needs to be around after season 1 other than the fact that they need somebody who can fight the big bad monsters. So I don't know. We'll get to that in the later seasons, but I feel like a lot of the problems with her can come back to the fact that she just has to stay around all the time. Which is why I wholeheartedly believe she should have died at the end of the season. I mean, I don't even think that's a hot take, seeing as how that was a narrative decision they already made. And it just makes sense for her arc about not being a monster. She thinks that she's a monster because she created all of this, then she finds a bunch of kids who appreciate her, and then she uses her powers to save them in the end, and in doing so she has to take a punishment, which is losing her life and being destroyed. Or you could say going to the Upside Down, but if that's the case, then she should spend more time there. But that's something to get to in season 2. And finally, for the kids, we have Mike, who is hands down the worst character in the entire show. It's not even because he's that bad of a character, it really is just that there's so much of him. Like, he's the main kid of the show, and he is by far the least interesting. And I know you guys don't like him either, because season 4 is y'all's favorite, which is the season where he is in it objectively the least. You remember what I was saying earlier about how all of the characters serve an archetypal goal, but they kind of transcend that later on, and that's what makes the show and the characters feel so special? Yeah, well, Mike's kind of the exception to the rule, which is why he sticks out so much. He really is just a good boy who likes his friends, which I guess can work on paper, but the problem is you need a really good actor to pull that off.
You're supposed to help us find him alive. You said he was alive. Why did you lie to us? What's wrong with you? What is wrong with you?
Oh, no. Yeah, I'll just say I like Finn Wolfhard as an actor. I think he's doing a lot of really good stuff now. But man, this was not a good start for him. And again, it's not necessarily that he's that bad. He's kind of on a similar level as the rest of the kids, which is fine. One of the best things about the show is seeing all the kids grow up and their acting gradually get better. But the problem is, yet again, he's the main character, and a lot of the dramatic scenes rely on his acting, which he just can't do. And again, this isn't a knock against the person, all right? I know I'm critiquing this little kid's acting, all right? I know. Okay, don't get mad at me, all right? I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. If I could break it down into really simple terms, you see, Mike is the worst character of Stranger Things for the same reason why Neopolita is the best character in RWBY. She's given a very minor role, and she's also literally mute, which means she doesn't have to say any dialogue written by these writers.
Some say your personality and character can define your semblance, while some claim that it's the other way around. There are still many who don't see a connection at all.
In contrast, Mike is given a lot of screen time, which means his flaws stick out a lot more than a lot of other characters. If you ask me, he should have just been a supporting character from the start. I mean, that's his whole thing, is that he's always about supporting everybody else and being a good spirit for the rest of the team. He's at his best in season 2 because of that, because he's the supporting character towards everybody else. And the final character we have to talk about is Steve Harrington, my beloved. Okay, but it really does baffle me how weird of a character Steve is when you consider where he came from. You see, I watched part of this series, and specifically a lot of season 1, with my brother in the room, just because it was something fun for us to do, and he really liked rewatching the show with me. And every time Steve came on screen, he would scream like a little girl in excitement, and I just didn't get it. But now I get it. Everyone loves the bad boy turned good. I mean, I know you all love Zuko just as much as you like this guy. In fact, I'm just gonna throw all these guys up here. Any of these guys your favorite characters? Yeah, I thought so. Steve Harrington is probably the best example I can think of those archetypal characters I was telling you about earlier, because in the beginning he is very clearly just the jock bully until he gets punched in the head so hard that he goes through an entire character arc in one scene. Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna have to repeat myself here. I do like Steve Harrington. In the later seasons, he's probably the best character and is really good throughout it. But man, is his character arc so messy. This man seriously goes from insulting all of Jonathan's family and basically insinuating that he killed his own brother and publicly shaming and making fun of Nancy, to wanting to be best friends with them and owning up to his mistakes in one scene. Sure, it was lightly implied that it was his friends who forced him to do that and he lost his temper and blah 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 blah, but I kind of need more than that. Like, he really goes from this.
Yeah, that house is full of screw-ups. You know, I guess I shouldn't really be surprised. A bunch of screw-ups in your
Jonathan,
family. I mean,
leave
your
it.
mom. I mean, I'm not even surprised
Jonathan,
what happened to your
leave
brother.
it.
To this.
Messed up. Okay? Really, please. I want to make things right. Okay, please.
Without any real prompting other than getting hit in the face with a cannonball. And yes, I do like Steve Harrington. I like his character arc on paper. I just think the way that it was translated feels so unnatural, and it's very clear that they plan to kill him off. In fact, I don't mean to toot my own horn here, but I bet I can predict exactly when they were going to kill him off. Right here. The Demogorgon rips his face off, and then Nancy and Jonathan go into the house and kill it. Not gonna lie, this might be the only instance where listening to massive fan outcry actually worked. Because we all know how that worked for Star Wars.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Steve Harrington does probably have the best character arc of the entire series, and definitely the best character arc of Season 1. The only problem is, I hate where it ends. Steve getting back together with Nancy is the biggest middle finger to his entire character arc, since his character is all about not needing validation from others, like having a cute girlfriend. And I think even the writers knew that this was a problem, since they immediately separated them in Season 2 and then broke them up. And now you might say, this is a lot of nitpicking. And to that I say, well, yeah, I mean, that's what I do. But seriously, this actually gets into a lot of what I wanted to talk about this first season and a lot of the show overall, which is that a lot of the overarching problems that I have with it, and I think a lot of people have with it, are very small and precise. There are just little things about the storytelling that stick out in my mind and dilute what could be a perfect show. And it also doesn't help that some of it is kind of unintentionally funny. Like, I absolutely love how there are these stock bully characters that follow all of the kids around, and they literally show up out of nowhere whenever they're supposed to be there, talk shit about everybody, and then disappear into nowhere again. And it makes it even funnier when you realize that they do not show up in any other season after this one. And there's not even just bullies for the kids. The teenagers also have stock bully characters that follow Steve around, who also just disappear into nowhere. Like this guy and girl here, whose names I don't remember, they literally get talked out by Steve, they leave, and then are never heard from again. You know, this show does have a really weird thing with stock bully characters. I'm gonna get back to that a little later. All in all, I did like a lot about this season. It's really hard to hate this season because it's just such a precise, nice thing. It's only really trying to do one thing, which is be an enthralling period piece style mystery from the 80s that reminds you a lot of Stephen King, and it more or less succeeds at that. Oh yeah, I guess I never really talked about the plot, did I? I mean, I think everybody just knows the plot's the best part of this show, and specifically the first season, so I didn't really feel a need to talk about the whole vanishing of Will Byers thing or the laboratory or anything like that, because everybody just knows that it's good. But yeah, that mystery and suspense is top tier. And I feel that's something this season doesn't really get a lot of credit for, because everybody knows that all of the seasons are supposed to be mysteries to some degree, but I think this one does it the best because of the way the information is doled out. We are only given information when the characters are given information, which means the story is just naturally more intriguing and has a better hook to it in general. And I know this is something that should seem very obvious and like a general thing that all mysteries should do, but when we get to the later seasons, I think they all suffer from not having as good of a mystery as this first season. Also, just a personal little thing, I think the Demogorgon is the coolest villain in the series, even better than Vecna. With that hot take out of the way, I'm going to give this season a 7 out of 10 and get out of here before I give you guys any other reason to want to kill me.
Oh, so forming an angry mob, eh? Who we going after?